The wind roared across the frozen tarmac like a wild animal loosed from its cage. Snowflakes slashed sideways in silver streaks, and the blinking runway lights blurred into a single white sheet of fury. A faint metallic groan echoed through the storm as a gleaming corporate helicopter tilted against the gale. Asher Vale gripped the long steel snow shovel until his knuckles burned. Beside him, 7-year-old Luna clutched a thermos of cocoa. With both mittened hands, her little boots sunk in snow almost to the knees. "It's like the sky is angry," she whispered. "Then we stay calm," Asher said, his voice steady as stone. "Storms don't last. They just test you." Above the howl of wind, a sharper roar cut through a rotor thump, powerful and sure. From the low clouds, a luxury helicopter descended in a crown of spinning ice. Blue strobe lights flashed across the whirling storm. The Crest Arrow insignia gleamed on its polished side, looking almost smug against the pale sky. The craft settled on the private pad like a giant hawk folding its wings. As the rotors slowed, the cabin door hissed open. A woman in a crimson wool coat stepped out, boots clicking with precise elegance even on the ice. Her dark hair was pinned high, and the hard winter light flashed off diamond earrings that seemed to spark when she moved. Marina Crest, CEO of Crest Arrow, heiress to one of the largest aviation empires in the country. Her assistant, Gideon Frost, followed close behind his charcoal coat, snapping in the wind. They looked like they belonged on a magazine cover, not in the teeth of a northern blizzard. Marina's eyes swept the snow-caked tarmac and landed on Asher and Luna. She tilted her chin, assessing the man in the faded military parka and scuffed boots. "Is this the ground crew?" she asked Gideon, but her voice carried easily over the wind. "That's him," Gideon said, barely glancing at the clipboard in his gloved hand. "The new winter hire, just a local dad picking up extra hours." Marina took a slow step closer, the red of her coat burning against the white storm. "Interesting," she said, her tone half curious, half playful. Her gaze lingered on the old helicopter parked behind Asher, its paint chipped, but the frame unmistakably military. Then she smiled, a quick, dazzling curve that cut like the wind itself. "Tell you what she called voice clear and daring. Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." The words hung in the icy air, shocking and sharp. Gideon barked a short laugh. A few technicians near the hangar turned to look unsure if they'd heard correctly. Asher straightened, snowflakes melting on his dark lashes. His eyes, storm gray and steady, met hers without a flicker. "That's quite an offer," he said quietly. Marina's smile widened, but there was a flicker of something else beneath it. Curiosity, maybe, or the faintest trace of respect. She hadn't expected him to answer. She certainly hadn't expected the calm in his voice, the unshaken confidence that came from something deeper than bravado. The rotor wash whipped around them, carrying the scent of jet fuel and snow. For a heartbeat, the world held still. If this moment has already pulled you in the challenge, thrown in the middle of a roaring storm, the quiet strength of a man with secrets deeper than the snow, stay with us. This story is about courage that hides in plain sight, about second chances that arrive in the unlikeliest blizzards. Before we lift off into the next scene, take a moment to like or share this journey with someone who believes in miracles of the heart. Now let's step closer and watch what happens when a casual dare turns into destiny. The storm deepened. Overhead, heavy clouds dragged like steel curtains across the sky. Asher returned to shoveling, methodical, as if nothing had happened. Luna peered up at Marina with wide eyes, sensing that something important had just begun. Gideon approached, his sharp profile set in a look of polite annoyance. "Ms. Crest, we need to inspect the fuel intake before the temperature drops again," he said. Then, lowering his voice, "These small-town hires won't last in this weather. I'll have a real crew flown in next week." Marina didn't answer. Her eyes were still on Asher, watching the clean, precise way he worked. There was discipline in every movement, the kind you don't learn in a snow removal job. Finally, she turned back toward the helicopter. "Very well," she said, almost to herself. Luna tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy." Why did she say that Asher knelt to brush snow from her hat? Sometimes people test each other with words, he said. It doesn't mean what it sounds like. But you could fly, it couldn't you? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it sliced through the storm like a bright bell. Asher's hands paused. Memories flashed the thunder of rotor blades over desert cliffs, the desperate weight of soldiers depending on him, the night sky filled with tracers of light. He took a breath and smiled faintly. "Once upon a time," he said. "But we're not here for that anymore." Still, the old machine behind them seemed to hum as if remembering every mile it had once flown. From the hangar, Clara Wren waved, beckoning them inside for warmth. "Hot cider's ready," she shouted. Asher stood his tall frame, cutting a silhouette against the swirling snow. "Let's warm up," he said, resting a gentle hand on Luna's shoulder. They started toward the cafe, but Marina's voice followed softer, now almost thoughtful. "Mr. Vale," she called. "It's Asher, right? You have a steady hand. I like that in a pilot." He turned, offered a courteous nod, and continued on. Behind her composed smile, Marina Crest felt a faint unease. Something about that man didn't fit the simple picture of a winter hire. And something about his daughter's quiet confidence, those eyes that seemed to see more than a child should, made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't expected. As the blizzard thickened and the evening lights of the cafe glowed like a hearth through the white veil, one truth settled silently over the airfield. This was not the last time Marina Crest would test the quiet man with the storm-gray eyes, because some dares once spoken refused to stay as jokes. They wait like destiny patient and unstoppable until the sky itself clears a path. Morning crept in with a pale metallic light. The blizzard that had raged all night left the small northern airfield, blanketed in drifts as tall as fences. Snowplows hummed in the distance, their orange beacons flashing like slow-moving fireflies. Inside the modest cafe by the hangar, the smell of cinnamon and strong coffee filled the air. Asher Vale sat at the corner table, Luna beside him, her chin barely clearing the wooden surface as she cradled a steaming mug of cocoa. Outside the frost-misted window, the world looked clean and untouched, as though the storm had scrubbed away yesterday's daring words. Yet those words refused to fade. "Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you." Marina Crest's challenge still echoed in Asher's mind, not because of the marriage tease, but because of the quiet curiosity behind it. She had looked at him with the same sharpness he had seen in commanding officers, people trained to spot more than a surface story. Luna stirred her cocoa, her small, mittened hands finally warm. "Daddy," she said. "Do you think she meant it?" Asher set down his coffee. "Which part?" "The helicopter part." Luna said, eyes bright with the logic only a child could carry. "She saw something. Maybe she knows you can fly." He smiled faintly. "Maybe she was just having fun." "But you can," Luna insisted. "You always tell me we can do things if we once learned how." Asher's smile thinned. Memories rose like ghosts, the desert's baking wind, the roar of rotors, the night missions, when every second meant a life saved or lost. He had learned to fly in chaos, but he had also promised himself to leave that life behind for her sake. Before he could answer, the cafe door swung open, bells jingling against a rush of cold air. Marina Crest entered like a brushstroke of red on a white canvas. Behind her, Gideon Frost followed his long coat, shedding ice crystals onto the floor. Clara Wren, the cafe owner, looked up from the counter. "Good morning," she said warmly. "Storm, treat you kindly." Marina removed her gloves with slow precision. "It tested us," she said with a half smile. Her eyes found Asher's corner table almost immediately. "Mr. Vale, isn't it?" Asher rose politely. "Yes, ma'am. Mind if we join you?" It was phrased as a question, but Marina was already pulling out a chair. Gideon remained standing, expression carved in polite disapproval. Luna brightened. "We have cocoa," she said. "It's really good here." Marina's smile softened just a touch. "Then I'll trust your recommendation." Clara arrived with a fresh pot of coffee and a second mug of cocoa for Luna, giving Marina a knowing glance before retreating. Marina folded her hands, studying Asher. "Yesterday's storm was enlightening," she began. "Watching you work out there, steady, methodical, it reminded me of my father's pilots." Asher kept his gaze calm. "I've worked in bad weather before. Bad weather is one thing," Gideon cut in voice, smooth but edged. "Landing aircraft in combat is another. You don't get that kind of calm from shoveling snow." Asher met Gideon's eyes evenly. "I don't talk about old jobs much. I focus on the one I have now." Marina tilted her head, the faintest spark of intrigue in her eyes. But there was an old job. Silence hung for a beat. Luna looked between the adults, sensing the invisible current. Finally, Asher said, "I served in the Marines. Aviation rescue." Marina's eyebrows lifted slightly. Gideon's did too, though his skepticism sharpened. "That explains the way you moved," Marina said softly. Gideon, however, pressed forward. "With respect, Ms. Crest, we're here to discuss the test flight, not a resume from 10 years ago." Marina waved him off gently but firmly. "Everything connects, Gideon. Sometimes the best pilots don't sit in boardrooms." For the first time, Asher caught a flicker of warmth beneath her CEO composure. She wasn't mocking anymore. She was weighing possibilities. The conversation turned to the helicopter outside, a new Crest Aero model built for high-altitude medical transport. Marina described her dream of creating a rapid response rescue network across the northern states, an idea Asher found quietly admirable. Luna leaned closer, wide-eyed. "So you help people who are hurt?" "That's the goal," Marina said, smiling at the child's earnestness. "Get them to hospitals faster than an ambulance on icy roads." Luna beamed. "That's wonderful." Asher's heart softened at his daughter's enthusiasm. It was the same spark he used to feel before each mission, before war complicated the word rescue. When Marina and Gideon finally rose to leave, she turned back once more. "Mr. Vale," she said, "if you ever want to do more than shovel snow, I'd like to hear your ideas. We need people who stay calm when the sky is falling." Asher inclined his head. "I'll keep that in mind." Her eyes held his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Then she stepped into the winter light. Gideon followed, his face unreadable. The rest of the day unfolded under a glass blue sky. The storm had cleared, but its memory lingered in sculpted drifts and glittering icicles. Asher spent the afternoon inspecting the airfield with the other workers, his mind replaying Marina's words. "If you ever want to do more than shovel snow." That night, after Luna was asleep, he stood by the small window of their cabin. The moonlight silvered the snow and cast the parked helicopters in quiet glory. One, an older military model retired to training flights, seemed to beckon. His thoughts drifted back to a particular mission. Years ago, mountains of Afghanistan, a valley where every second had meant a life. He had flown through enemy fire, relying on instinct and training. He had saved lives. And afterward, he had walked away believing he was done with the sky. But the sky, it seemed, wasn't done with him. The following morning, Asher and Luna returned to the airfield early. The cold was sharper, the air clearer. Gideon Frost was already there, speaking with a technician. His voice carried through the crisp air. Not thrilled about some local ex-Marine near our aircraft. Liability risk. And that child cute. But distractions aren't safe. Asher felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Old instincts warned him some storms don't come from clouds. He led Luna toward the hangar, determined not to let Gideon's words seep into her bright morning. Yet inside, a quiet resolve took root. He would protect her world no matter what kind of weather, skyborne or human, came next. And somewhere deep, a question stirred like an engine waiting for ignition. Was Marina's unexpected challenge, "Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you," a careless tease, or the first note of a call he was destined to answer? As the sun flared against the icy horizon, Asher felt the pull of something larger than chance. The hidden wings of his past were still there, waiting, and the sky might soon ask him to fly again. The next morning broke crystal clear, as if the storm had never existed. Sunlight flared across a world freshly polished in silver and blue. The hangars sparkled with frost. Even the long runway gleamed like a frozen river. Yet beneath that brightness, a warning pulsed through the airfield like a low electric hum. Inside the operations office, Asher Vale bent over a weather report pinned to the corkboard. The bold black letters at the top made his stomach tighten. Arctic front moving south. Blizzard warning within 36 hours. He stared at the numbers, their cold certainty heavier than any snow. A second storm was coming faster and fiercer than the last. Morning Asher Clara Wren's cheerful voice called as she entered with a thermos of spiced coffee. "Gorgeous day, isn't it? Though the news says it won't last." "Already saw it," Asher said. "Barometers falling fast. We'll have another blizzard before the weekend." Clara frowned. "You sure feels too calm out there." He gave a small, knowing smile. "That's when you know a storm is serious, when the sky goes quiet first." Before Clara could reply, the hangar doors clanged open. Marina Crest strode in with Gideon Frost at her side. Her crimson coat was replaced by a charcoal wool jacket, but the same controlled confidence framed her every movement. "Asher," she said without preamble. "Good morning." He nodded. "Morning." Gideon held a tablet in one hand. "Our next test flight is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. We're running an endurance check on the new Crest Aero Rescue model." Asher tapped the forecast sheet. "You'll want to reconsider that. This isn't a friendly sky setting in." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "We have professional meteorologists for that." "I respect them," Asher replied evenly. "But I trust what I see and hear. You'll be flying into whiteout conditions. Visibility could drop to nothing in minutes." Marina glanced at the report, and then at Asher, studying him. "You're saying cancel? I'm saying delay. 1 day, maybe 2. Gideon exhaled through his nose. "With respect, Ms. Crest, we have investors expecting a report. Postponement costs money." The silence stretched. Marina's gaze stayed locked on Asher. She remembered the steadiness of his hands, the way he had worked through the last storm, with an almost unshakable rhythm. Finally, she said, "Let's meet again in 2 hours with the latest data. I want a full risk analysis. Include Mr. Vale's observations." Gideon's jaw tightened, but he gave a clipped nod. "Of course." When they left, Clara raised her brows. "She listens to you." Asher shook his head. "She listens to reason. That's different." But a quiet unease settled in him. He had recognized something in Marina's eyes, an ambition that could turn dangerous if mixed with pressure from investors and Gideon's relentless drive. That evening, Asher walked with Luna along the snowy trail behind their small cabin. The woods glowed soft under a lavender dusk, pine branches heavy with new snow. "Will the big storm hurt the planes?" Luna asked, skipping to keep warm. "If people prepare, they'll be fine," Asher said. She looked up, her breath a tiny white cloud. "What if they don't?" he hesitated. "Then we help." She smiled as if the answer was obvious. Like you used to. They stopped at a clearing where the frozen lake reflected a pale moon. Silence wrapped around them, a stillness so deep it almost rang. And in that quiet memories crept in the whirl of rotors over black mountains the radio calls that still sometimes haunted his sleep. It had been 6 years since that last mission. 6 years since a rescue op in Afghanistan turned to chaos when a sudden downdraft slammed the chopper into a cliff. He had saved the crew, but not the medic seated behind him. The guilt had clung like a permanent shadow, one reason he'd walked away from flying. Luna tugged his glove. "Daddy, you're far away again." He blinked, grounding himself, just thinking about the weather. "You don't have to be scared," she said simply. "I believe in you." Something warm broke through his chest, part pride, part ache. Her trust was a light he hadn't known he needed. The next day dawned with that eerie calm he had warned about. By mid-morning, the sky took on a strange pearl-gray hue that made even seasoned mechanics glance upward uneasily. Inside the main hangar, Marina and Gideon argued in low, sharp tones. Asher approached just as Gideon raised his voice. "Investors will not accept delay. We must prove the endurance range before the quarter ends." Marina's answer was tight, but firm. "I won't risk a flight if conditions are unsafe." When she noticed Asher, she broke off. "What's your read?" "Winds are shifting faster than forecast," he said. "Pressure drop is steep. We'll have whiteout by nightfall. If you fly today, you may not land where you planned, if at all." Gideon snapped. "You sound like you want us grounded forever." Asher didn't flinch. "I want you alive tomorrow." For a long moment, Marina said nothing. Then she turned to Gideon. "We postpone. 2 days minimum." Gideon's lips compressed to a thin line. "Very well," he said, but his eyes burned with silent frustration. As the crew dispersed to secure the equipment, Marina lingered. "Thank you," she said softly to Asher. "You speak with the certainty of someone who's seen worse than a business delay." Asher met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Storms don't care about schedules," he said. Her mouth curved into a thoughtful half-smile. "Maybe neither should we." That night, heavy snow began to fall soft at first, then harder, until the world outside disappeared. From the cabin window, Asher watched flakes spin like white comets in the porch light. Luna slept peacefully in the next room. He sat with an old leather-bound journal on his lap, a relic from his service years. Inside were flight logs, notes from missions, and a single photograph of his late wife smiling on a summer day. He traced the edges of the picture, feeling again the old ache of loss and the weight of promises made. A knock startled him. He opened the door to find Marina standing there, wrapped in a deep green parka. Snow crystals caught in her hair. Behind her, the storm hissed like a restless sea. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. The power flickered at the lodge. "I remembered you mentioned a backup generator." "Come in," he said, stepping aside. She entered, her cheeks flushed from the cold. The cabin's modest warmth seemed to draw something softer from her. "I wanted to thank you again," she said. "Not just for today, for yesterday, for everything. Gideon won't admit it, but you likely saved our project." "It wasn't about the project," Asher said quietly. "It was about people." Their eyes met the firelight, catching glints of understanding. For a moment, the blizzard outside felt like nothing more than a distant hush. Then a sharp crack split the night, a sound of splintering wood and twisting metal from somewhere across the airfield. Marina stiffened. Asher's instinct snapped awake. He reached for his heavy coat. "Something's wrong at the hangar," he said. Marina's breath quickened. "What do we do?" "Stay with Luna," he ordered gently but firmly. "I'll check it out." As he stepped into the storm, the cold struck like a physical force, but adrenaline burned hotter. The sound had been too sharp for shifting ice alone. Something had given way, something important. Above him, the sky churned alive with unseen power. The past he'd tried to bury surged within him. The readiness, the focus, the unshakable clarity of a man trained to meet crisis head-on. Whatever waited in that dark, howling field, Asher Vale was no longer just a quiet snow shoveler. The storm had called, and he was already answering. The wind came alive like a freight train in the dark. It slammed against Asher Vale the moment he stepped outside, nearly ripping the cabin door off its hinges. Snow whipped in blinding sheets, stinging his face and soaking through the seams of his parka. The airfield security lights were ghostly halos in the swirling white, blinking in and out like distant lighthouses. A deep metallic groan carried through the storm. Asher followed the sound boots crunching over drifts that already erased his own footprints. Each gust felt stronger than the last, and somewhere in that chaos he could sense movement, something heavier than flying snow. Behind him, the cabin door opened a crack. Daddy Luna's voice was thin against the roar. He turned sharply. Marina Crest stood in the doorway with Luna clutching her hand. The child's eyes were wide with fear, but bright with determination. "Stay inside," Asher called, his voice sharper than he intended. "Bolt the door and wait for me." Marina nodded and pulled Luna back, just as another gust slammed the frame shut. Asher adjusted the strap of his flashlight and pressed forward. The groaning sound grew louder, deeper, until he recognized it. The unmistakable screech of metal stressed to breaking. He rounded the corner of the main hangar and stopped cold. One of the massive overhead doors had been forced half open by the wind. It bucked wildly on its track, threatening to tear free. Worse, through the gap, he saw the Crest Aero prototype helicopter, the very machine scheduled for the endurance test, sitting exposed. Snow and ice battered its polished frame, and the winds howled through the opening like a beast intent on dragging it out. Asher's training surged to the forefront. No hesitation. No panic. He sprinted toward the door control panel mounted on the wall, his boots slipping on ice-slick concrete. The button to lower the door clicked uselessly. Power lines must have gone down when the storm hit. A violent crash shook the hangar as a gust slammed the half-open door outward. Sparks showered from the track. In seconds, the door could snap entirely, turning into a sail that might drag the helicopter with it or crush anything beneath. Asher pulled a heavy wrench from a nearby tool rack and climbed the maintenance ladder to the track. Wind clawed at his back. He hooked one arm around the frame and worked with the other, fighting to jam the manual locking bar. The cold bit through his gloves until his fingers burned. Below, a sudden flash of red caught his eye. Marina. She had ignored his command and was running toward the hangar, head bent against the gale. Behind her, Luna followed a few steps before Marina spun, crouched, and shouted something Asher couldn't hear. The child reluctantly stopped at the door, hugging herself against the cold. Marina reached the ladder and shouted upward, her voice breaking through the wind. "What can I do, mainbreaker?" Asher pointed toward the far wall. "Right side, crank it clockwise hard." She dashed across the floor, her boots sliding but never faltering. Moments later, a deep metallic clunk echoed through the hangar. The overhead lights flickered and the door shuddered, then began to lower, groaning in protest. A sudden gust struck like a giant's hand. The ladder lurched, slamming Asher's shoulder against the frame. He bit back a shout and tightened his grip. The door's right side chain skipped a tooth with a screech of tearing steel. "Hold it steady," he yelled. Marina grabbed the chain housing with both hands, throwing her weight against it. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the door steadied, inching downward, until with a final clanging thud, it slammed shut and locked. Silence followed, thick, eerie, broken only by their harsh breathing and the distant moan of wind against the sealed hangar. Asher climbed down his muscles, trembling with the sudden release of adrenaline. Marina leaned against the wall, snow melting in her hair, eyes wide, but blazing with resolve. "You should have stayed inside," he said, breathless, "and let you be crushed out here." Her voice was sharp but trembling. Not a chance. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, the storm outside hammering against the steel, but powerless to enter. When they returned to the cabin, Luna leapt from the couch and threw herself at her father. "Daddy," she cried. "I prayed so hard he held her tight." "You did good," he said, voice thick with relief. "Real good." Marina closed the door behind them and peeled off her soaked gloves. The lamplight turned her snow-dusted hair into a halo. "The generator's holding," she said. "But Gideon keeps calling. Cell service is patchy. He wants an update." Asher set Luna down gently. "Tell him the hangar's secure, and tell him to stay put at the lodge. No one drives tonight." Marina's lips curved into a wry smile. "You give orders, like a man who's used to being obeyed." "Habit from another life," Asher admitted. Something softened in her expression. "That other life," she said quietly. "It trained you for nights like this, didn't it?" Asher looked into the fire where sparks flared and vanished. "It trained me to protect people. But it also took more than it gave. That's why I walked away." Marina sat across from him, her posture graceful yet unguarded. "I'm starting to believe you didn't just walk away," she said. "You chose a different battlefield. One with snow and silence instead of gunfire." He met her eyes. "Maybe. But the instinct doesn't leave." For a while they sat in companionable quiet. Luna, reassured, fell asleep on the couch with her head on a folded quilt. Outside the storm howled, but felt distant now, as though the cabin itself was a sanctuary no wind could breach. Finally Marina spoke again, her voice low. "When I first saw you, I thought you were just a quiet man with a shovel. I even turned it into a joke." Her cheeks flushed slightly at the memory of her dare. "But last night you saw something else." Asher finished softly. "Yes," she whispered, "and it startled me more than I expected." Asher studied her across the flickering firelight. In her eyes, he saw not the polished CEO, but a woman who carried her own storms, pressures, expectations, loneliness behind a perfect veneer. "You saved more than a helicopter tonight," she said after a moment. "You saved people's dreams. Mine included." He wanted to respond, but words felt heavy, unnecessary. Instead, he gave a quiet nod, the kind soldiers share after surviving something that could have gone very differently. Near midnight, the generator hummed steadily, while the blizzard's fury began to ebb. Snow still battered the cabin, but the rhythm softened. Marina stretched a blanket over Luna, then stood at the window. "It's like the world is being remade," she said. Her voice tinged with wonder. Asher joined her. Through the frosted glass, faint auroras flickered, a green and violet veil dancing beyond the storm clouds. For a brief moment, the sky itself seemed to glow in gratitude. Neither of them spoke. They simply stood side by side, watching the light swirl over the silent airfield, where a helicopter and a handful of human hearts had weathered the night. And though Asher wouldn't have put it into words, he knew that something inside him had shifted as surely as the storm outside. A door long closed was creaking open, one that led back to the skies, and perhaps toward a future he hadn't dared imagine since the day he left war behind. Morning arrived in silence, a fragile hush after the chaos of the night. The world outside Asher Vale's cabin looked reborn, peaks of snow glinting like frozen waves, trees bowed under white crowns. Yet beneath the calm beauty lay a tension that quickened his heartbeat. Storms like this rarely left without a parting shot. From the small kitchen came the hiss of percolating coffee. Luna padded in with sleepy eyes and a blanket around her shoulders. "It's so quiet," she whispered. "Too quiet," Asher murmured. He checked the radio on the counter, a relic from his Marine days. Static filled the room, broken only by occasional faint beeps. No weather updates, no local chatter. The main network was down. A soft knock startled them. Marina Crest stepped inside, cheeks flushed from the cold, a phone clutched in her gloved hand. "Finally reached Gideon," she said breathlessly. "The lodge is cut off, no power, no road access. But that's not the worst." Asher's muscles tensed. What is a small medical transport went up before the storm fully hit. They were trying to reach a critical patient in Grey Pines. They lost contact overnight. Gideon's team can't locate them. Luna's eyes widened. "Are they lost?" Marina nodded grimly. "Probably down somewhere between here and the northern ridge. The rescue units in the city are grounded, visibility too low, and the roads impassable. They asked if we had anyone here who could help from the air." The words hung in the warm cabin like a flare in darkness. Asher met Marina's gaze. In it, he saw fear, but also a flicker of something else, trust. "You're asking me," he said quietly. "I am," she replied, "because you're the only one I've seen who could keep a helicopter steady in a storm like this." For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Memories surged. Missions, where every minute decided a life, the weight of past losses pressing like cold iron. He had promised Luna and himself that those days were behind him. Then Luna slipped her small hand into his. "Daddy," she said softly. "You always tell me we help when we can." The choice suddenly wasn't a choice at all. Asher stood the decision settling over him like a familiar uniform. "Which aircraft is flight ready?" Marina exhaled a mixture of relief and awe. "The prototype you helped save last night, the Aurora X. Fully fueled heated hangar. Gideon prepped it before power cut. Good, Asher said, already moving. We leave in 20 minutes. Inside the hangar, the Aurora X stood like a waiting hawk, its sleek frame glinting beneath backup lights. Gideon paced near the nose of the craft, frustration etched into every motion. "You can't be serious," he said when Marina explained. "Vale isn't on our crew list. He isn't cleared. He's the only one who can fly this in today's conditions." Marina cut in her voice like steel. "This isn't a corporate exercise, Gideon. It's life or death." Gideon opened his mouth, then closed it. Something in Marina's expression left no room for argument. Asher inspected the craft with professional precision, his hands moving over panels and gauges like a pianist across familiar keys. It felt both strange and utterly natural, the smell of fuel and metal, the hum of a machine eager for sky. The ghost of his past life rose around him not as torment, but as a steadying presence. Marina approached, wearing a thick flight jacket over her tailored clothes. "I'm coming," she said simply. Asher hesitated. "You don't have to." "I do," she insisted. "This is my company's aircraft." And her voice softened. "I trust you, but I won't let you carry this alone." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Strap in and follow my lead." Before boarding, he knelt to Luna's height. "You stay with Clara until we're back. Promise me." Luna hugged him fiercely. "Promise you'll come back," she said. "I will," he said, meeting her eyes. "That's a vow." The helicopter's engines roared to life, vibrations running through the hangar floor. Asher guided the Aurora X out into the blinding white. The storm hadn't truly ended. It had only crouched low, waiting. Gusts battered the craft, but he kept a light touch on the controls, coaxing it upward, until the ground fell away and the sky wrapped around them. Marina sat in the co-pilot seat, headset in place. "Visibility is almost zero," she said, peering at the snow wall ahead. "Then we don't trust our eyes," Asher replied, his voice calm. "We trust the instruments, the sound of the rotors and instinct." They climbed into a world of ghostly shapes. White sky melted into white earth until there was no horizon, only the soft glow of their own running lights. Yet Asher felt the machine respond to him like an old friend, every vibration speaking a language he hadn't forgotten. Minutes stretched. Through the radio came nothing but static and the occasional faint pulse of an emergency beacon. "There," Marina said, suddenly, pointing to a flicker on the radar screen, a weak signal fading in and out. Asher adjusted course, heart rate steady. "Hold on," he warned, dipping the nose of the craft. The wind fought back with violent bursts. The helicopter tilted, shuddered, but Asher's hands were a quiet counterpoint, precise, unyielding. Memories of combat flights wove seamlessly into the present. This was what he had been trained for: clarity in chaos. At last, through the swirling white, a dark scar appeared below broken pines, a glint of metal half buried in snow. There, Marina's voice cracked with relief. The downed medical chopper lay on its side, one rotor blade snapped like a twig. A flare sputtered weakly nearby. Asher circled once, gauging the landing zone. "Too tight for a direct set-down," he said. "I'll hover." "We use the winch." Marina's eyes widened. "You'll hold a hover in this crosswind?" "We don't have another option," he said. He guided the Aurora X into position, holding it rock steady as the rescue winch lowered. Two paramedics clung to the cable, their patient strapped between them. Snow swirled like a living thing clawing at the ropes, but Asher adjusted minutely, every motion precise and deliberate. One by one, they hauled the survivors aboard, cold, shaken, but alive. When the last crew member was safe, Asher eased the craft upward and banked south toward the airfield. The return flight cut through a sky still restless with fading storm, but compared to the chaos below, it felt almost serene. Marina exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging. You saved them," she said, voice almost reverent. "They saved themselves, too," Asher replied quietly. "We meet halfway in the air." She turned to study him, her eyes shining with something beyond admiration. "You weren't just a Marine pilot," she said softly. "You're still every inch of who you were. You never stopped being that man." For the first time in years, Asher didn't flinch from those words. "Maybe I just needed a reason to remember," he said. Back at the airfield, Clara and Luna waited on the snowy tarmac as the Aurora X descended. The moment the skids touched down, Luna sprinted forward and flung herself into Asher's arms. He held her tight, breathing in the small warmth of her, a warmth deeper than the heated hangar could ever give. Marina stepped out behind him, her crimson scarf snapping in the wind. Gideon approached, speechless for once, as the rescued crew were helped into waiting vehicles. The medical team leader gripped Asher's hand with a fierce gratitude. "We'd have frozen out there without you," he said. Asher only nodded. "Glad you're safe. That's what matters." When the others drifted toward the infirmary, Marina remained beside him, the fading storm casting pale light on her face. "You turned a machine into a miracle," she said softly. He looked at her, the snow still swirling around them like slow confetti. "No," he said, "we all did." But deep inside, he knew the truth. She had glimpsed something long dormant had come alive again in the sky. And perhaps so had something between them, something neither the storm nor time itself could keep grounded. The airfield slept under a veil of quiet the next morning, as though the world itself were catching its breath after so much fury. Fresh snow gleamed like powdered glass in the sunlight, and smoke from cabin chimneys drifted lazily against a flawless blue sky. For the first time in days, there was no urgency in the air, only a rare crystalline calm. Asher Vale stood alone in the main hangar, the wide steel doors propped half open to the gentle winter light. The Aurora X rested inside, still wearing a dusting of frost from the miraculous rescue flight. He moved slowly around the helicopter, hand trailing along the smooth curve of its fuselage, listening to the familiar soft tick of cooling metal. It felt different today. Not just a machine, but a silent witness to something reborn in him. Flying again had awakened an old muscle memory, but more than that, it had reminded him of the part of himself that once thrived on purpose, not just survival. "Beautiful morning," a voice said softly. He turned to find Marina Crest framed in the hangar doorway, her dark hair loose beneath a knitted cap, a faint pink on her cheeks from the cold. She wore a simple wool coat instead of her trademark executive red, and for a moment, she looked less like a CEO and more like a traveler, pausing to admire the sky. It is, Asher agreed, almost too quiet after everything. She stepped inside Boots, tapping lightly on the concrete. I couldn't stay at the lodge. I kept thinking about yesterday, about how close those people came to not seeing this morning. Asher nodded, his gaze sweeping the silent helicopter. They were lucky, and so were we. Marina stopped a few feet from him, her eyes searching his face. "No," she said softly. "It wasn't luck. It was you." He looked away, uncomfortable under the intensity of her regard. A lot of people helped. You held the chain when that door nearly tore free. You came on the rescue flight. She gave a small laugh. I followed your lead. You made the difference. A long pause stretched between them, filled with the quiet hum of the hangar and the distant caw of a raven on the roof. Marina took a slow breath, as if gathering courage. "When I first saw you," she said, "I thought you were just ordinary. A good man doing a simple job." I even turned that thought into a joke. Her lips curved with a rueful smile. "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." I can still hear my own voice, flippant, careless. Asher studied her, the memory of that moment, sharp and strangely sweet. People say things they don't expect to be taken seriously. Yes, she agreed, her voice almost a whisper. But after yesterday, it doesn't feel like a joke anymore. You risked your life to save strangers. You read the weather better than trained professionals. You stood in the center of that storm, as if you'd been preparing for it all your life. He exhaled slowly, the weight of old memories pressing close. I was trained for it. Years in the Marines' combat search and rescue. We went into places most people wouldn't dare. Sometimes we came back with everyone. Sometimes. He trailed off the unfinished sentence, carrying more than words could hold. Marina stepped nearer her eyes, softening. Sometimes it cost more than anyone could see. He met her gaze, surprised at how precisely she understood. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's why I walked away. I didn't want my daughter growing up with a father who disappeared into storms and never returned." And yet she said gently, "When the storm came to you, you didn't hesitate." "I hesitated," Asher admitted. "But Luna reminded me who I am. She believes in helping when you can. I couldn't let that belief die, not in her and not in me." Something warm flickered in Marina's eyes, admiration, and something deeper. She looked around the hangar, as if seeing it anew, not just a workplace, but the cradle of a quiet heroism she hadn't known existed outside old legends. "You know," she said, slowly, Crest Arrow began, "because my father believed aviation should save lives, not just make profits. Somewhere along the way, we started chasing numbers instead of miracles. Yesterday, you gave me back that vision." Asher felt a stirring of respect. then maybe the storm had its own mission. They shared a quiet smile, the kind that needed no explanation. The sound of small footsteps interrupted them. Luna came bounding in, cheeks pink from the cold. Clara ran close behind with a tray of steaming mugs. "Morning," Luna chirped. Clara made hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. "Best kind," Marina said, crouching to eye level with the child. "How are you feeling today, brave co-pilot?" Luna beamed, happy. "Daddy says the people we rescued are all okay. I prayed for them last night." Marina's smile softened into something luminous. "I think your prayers helped more than you know." Asher felt a quiet swell of pride. Luna's innocent courage had been a compass in the darkest hours. Clara handed out the mugs and gave Asher a meaningful look. "You should know," she said, "half the town is talking about what you did. Folks are calling it a miracle flight." Asher shook his head with a faint smile. It was teamwork and timing. Maybe Clara, said, her eyes twinkling. "But I've lived through plenty of storms. This one had a touch of grace in it. Don't sell that short." Later, as the others drifted back toward the cafe, Marina lingered beside the Aurora X with Asher. The morning sun poured through the half-open doors, bathing the helicopter in a soft, golden glow. "I want you to consider something," Marina said, her voice steady but tinged with anticipation. "Crest Aero is launching a permanent Northern Rescue Division. We need someone to lead it, someone who understands storms, machines, and people. Someone like you." Asher stiffened. "I left that life for a reason." "I know," she said quickly. "And I wouldn't ask if I didn't think it could give you something back on your terms. This isn't combat. It's life-saving. You'd have control over schedules, safety, everything." He looked toward the snowy field where Luna's laughter still echoed faintly. "My first job is being her dad." "And that wouldn't change," Marina said. "We'd build around her needs. She could even grow up seeing what real heroism looks like without the war." For a long moment he said nothing. The helicopter gleamed in the sun like a silent invitation. Finally, he turned to Marina, his gray eyes thoughtful. "You're asking me to fly again. Not just once, but as a way of life. I'm asking you to let your gift keep saving people," she replied. "To let the sky be part of your healing, not just your past." Something in her voice, part plea, part belief, moved him more than he expected. It wasn't just a business proposal. It was a bridge between what he had been and what he might still become. "I'll think about it," he said quietly. "That's all I ask," she said. And her smile was warm enough to soften even the lingering chill of the hangar. As the day waned, Asher watched Marina walk back toward the lodge, her figure framed against the glittering snow. The sun dipped low, casting long amber rays across the airfield and gilding the Aurora X in a light that felt almost sacred. For the first time in years, he sensed not just the memory of purpose, but the promise of it. And woven into that promise was Marina herself, no longer the stranger who once tossed a careless dare, but a woman whose courage and vision matched his own. The storm had revealed more than hidden wings in the sky. It had begun to uncover hidden places in their hearts, places where trust and love might yet take flight. The following week unfolded with a deceptive calm. The sky over the northern valley stayed a hard, brilliant blue, and the runways lay open like silver ribbons across the snow. Tourists came to marvel at the miraculous rescue, and local newspapers carried Asher Vale's name on their front pages, with headlines like, "Pilot Veteran Saves, Lost Crew in Record Storm." Asher tried to keep life simple morning cocoa, with Luna maintenance shifts at the hangar, quiet dinners at their cabin, but he sensed a current running beneath the peaceful surface, a subtle tension that had nothing to do with weather. It began with small signs. Gideon Frost no longer offered curt nods when they crossed paths. He barely looked at Asher at all. In meetings, when Marina Crest brought up the proposed Northern Rescue Division, Gideon's jaw set tight and his eyes hardened like slate. One afternoon, as Asher finished a safety check on the Aurora X, he overheard raised voices in Marina's office. Through the partly closed door came Gideon's clipped baritone. "You can't possibly consider putting him in charge. He's an unvetted outsider with no corporate discipline. Investors will laugh I'm considering what's best for the mission." Marina interrupted her voice, sharp but controlled. "And Asher Vale has proven himself in conditions few trained pilots could manage. This company isn't a charity for ex-military thrill-seekers," Gideon shot back. Asher turned quietly away before hearing more. He wasn't one to eavesdrop, but the words burned. He'd been in enough chains of command to recognize the tone a man maneuvering to remove an obstacle. That evening at Clara Wrent's cafe, Asher sat with Luna while she worked through her homework. The warm smell of cinnamon rolls wrapped the room, but his thoughts were far from cozy. Clara refilled his coffee and leaned in. "You look like a man with clouds over his horizon," she said gently. He managed a small smile. "Just work politics. Nothing new under the sun." Clara's sharp eyes missed little. "Does it involve a certain CEO and her right-hand man?" "Something like that," he admitted. "I don't mind staying out of it. But if his plans get in the way of rescue work, of saving lives, that's different." Clara rested a comforting hand on his arm. "Storms don't always come from the sky, Asher. Some walk on two legs and wear tailored coats." Her words stayed with him long after he and Luna trudged home through the starlit snow. The next morning confirmed his unease. Asher arrived at the hangar to find Marina waiting beside the Aurora X, a folded newspaper in hand. Her expression was composed, but her eyes sparked with quiet fury. "Good morning," he said cautiously. She held out the paper. The headline blared, "Crest Aero's Risky Hero Questions About Ex-Marine Pilot's Record." Beneath it, a photograph of Asher taken after the rescue flight. Unflattering in its suddenness, his face, shadowed eyes tired. "They're claiming Marina said her voice tight, that you left the service under questionable circumstances, that you were involved in an incident overseas." Asher felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "I know the incident they're twisting," he said evenly. "A rescue op in Afghanistan. We took fire, lost a medic. Command cleared me of fault. But to outsiders, it can look messy." Marina's eyes softened. "You don't have to explain. I trust you." He exhaled, grateful for her certainty. "Who fed them this? I have my suspicions," she said. Gideon Frost entered at that moment, his timing almost theatrical. "Morning," he said smoothly, as if nothing were amiss. But the faint smirk beneath his polite mask betrayed him. Marina turned to face him. "Did you speak to the press, Gideon?" "Of course not," he said too quickly. "I merely mentioned during an investor call that we were vetting all potential leadership candidates. Reporters draw their own conclusions." "That's convenient," she replied coolly. Gideon's gaze slid to Asher. "No offense, Vale, but this is precisely why corporate roles require clean optics. Our donors expect unimpeachable records." Asher met his eyes without flinching. Saving lives rarely makes for clean headlines. For a flicker of a moment, Gideon's expression hardened, then he masked it with a shrug. "Just doing my duty." When he left, Marina pressed her fingers to her temple. "He's playing a long game. If investors panic, they might pressure me to drop the Northern Rescue Division, or at least drop you." "I don't want to cause trouble," Asher said quietly. "If my presence risks the mission, I'll step aside." "No," she said firmly. "You don't run from storms. Neither do I. We'll face this together." Her conviction lit something warm inside him, deeper than gratitude. That night, Asher sat with Luna by the fire, the newspaper folded on the table. She traced the photo with a small finger. "They make you look scary," she said softly. They don't know the whole story, he answered. Sometimes people only see what they want. She climbed into his lap and rested her head on his chest. I know who you are. That's what matters. Her simple faith felt like armor against every headline. 2 days later, Marina called an emergency meeting in the large conference room of the Crest Arrow Lodge. Investors attended via video screens, their faces flickering like distant stars. Gideon sat at the far end of the polished table, immaculate and silent. Marina began with calm authority. You've read the reports. Let me be clear, they misrepresent the facts. Mr. Vale's record with the United States Marine Corps is exemplary. He is a decorated combat rescue pilot whose decisions saved dozens of lives. I have verified this personally. One investor, a silver-haired woman, leaned forward. Still, public perception can be unforgiving. Are you prepared for the blowback? Yes, Marina said without hesitation. Because this project isn't built on perception. It's built on saving lives. And there is no one more qualified to lead it. Gideon shifted in his chair, eyes narrowing. You're risking the company's reputation for a man you've known barely 2 weeks. Marina met his gaze steadily. I'm investing in character, not calendar days. I would rather stake Crest Arrow's name on a man who runs into storms than on one who leaks stories to undermine our mission. A hush fell over the room. The accusation hung unmistakably in the air. Gideon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. After the call ended, the room emptied quickly, leaving only Marina and Asher. She turned to him, her face glowing with quiet triumph. They backed the project. Full funding approved. Asher let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That was bold. It was necessary, she replied. Then softer. You deserve someone to fight for you. For a long moment they simply stood there, the tension of the past days draining away. Marina reached out and laid a hand on his arm, her touch, light but sure. Thank you, Asher said quietly, for believing when it would have been easier not to. I believe because of what I've seen, she said. The storms only revealed what was already there. Her eyes held his with a warmth that felt deeper than victory, something that hummed like a quiet promise. Outside, the night was luminous with moonlight. Asher walked back to the cabin with Luna's mittened hand in his Marina beside them. The air was sharp and clean, the stars brilliant as shards of ice. For the first time since the war, Asher felt the deep, steady certainty of a life not merely survived, but chosen. Gideon's gambit had failed. The Northern Rescue Division would rise. And in the silent exchange between him and Marina, as their shoulders brushed on the snowy path, he sensed something else beginning to rise, something even more daring than flying through storms. The quiet, unstoppable flight of the heart. The following morning dawned sharp and clear, but inside, Asher Vale carried a different kind of storm. News of Gideon's leaked story still clung to him like frost. The Northern Rescue Division was moving forward with investor support, yet he felt the weight of unfinished business truths he had never shared outside military briefings or a therapist's quiet office. He found Marina Crest already at the airfield, standing beside the Aurora X, as if she'd been waiting for hours. She wore a simple navy coat and wool scarf, no trace of the CEO glamour from their first encounter. The early sun burnished her dark hair and cast a soft light on her thoughtful expression. You came early, Asher said, approaching across the crisp snow. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. Yesterday we won a fight for the project. But I keep thinking about the story Gideon tried to use against you. I know you said it was complicated, but if you're willing, I'd like to understand more than headlines. Asher studied her face. There was no hint of accusation, only a quiet openness. If I tell you, he said slowly, it has to be all of it. Not the polished version. The real one. That's exactly what I want, Marina replied. They walked inside the hangar where the helicopter's shadow stretched long across the concrete. The big doors were half open, letting in the scent of cold metal and pine. Asher rested a hand on the smooth fuselage and began. 6 years ago, I was stationed with a Marine Aviation Rescue Unit in Afghanistan. We flew missions no one else wanted: night insertions, emergency extractions under fire. One night, we got a call about a medical team pinned down in a mountain valley. Bad weather, worse terrain. Command said it was almost impossible. We went anyway. Marina listened without a word. We made it in, but on the way out, a sudden downdraft slammed us against a cliff face. I fought the controls and kept us flying, but we lost one rotor and barely cleared the ridge. I saved the crew, but our medic, a friend of mine, didn't survive. Officially, I was cleared. The report said no pilot could have done more. He paused, voice tightening. But the truth, I replayed every decision for years, wondering if a different angle, a faster lift, a single second, could have saved her. The hangar was silent except for the distant drip of melting snow. I came home, Asher continued, but the noise didn't stop. Nightmares, guilt, the weight of being called a hero when I felt like anything but. I left active duty, moved north, and promised Luna and myself that I'd never fly another mission. I wanted to be her father, not a ghost chasing storms. When he finally looked at Marina, her eyes were luminous, not with pity, but with something steadier. "That's what Gideon tried to twist," she said quietly. "The hardest night of your life." Asher nodded. He sees scandal. I see a name I'll never forget, and a promise I made to a little girl who lost her mother too soon. That's the truth. Marina stepped closer, her voice firm, but gentle. And yet when the storm came here, you chose to fly. You didn't betray that promise, you fulfilled it. You showed Luna that courage isn't about seeking danger. It's about answering when people need you most. Her words landed with a weight different from praise, like a key turning in a long locked door. Later that day, Marina called a community meeting in the small town hall by the harbor. She insisted Asher join her. When they entered, the room fell to a respectful hush. Local residents, airport workers, and a few of the rescued medical crew filled the wooden benches. Clara Wren stood near the front with Luna, who waved enthusiastically. Marina opened the gathering with clear, steady words. "Many of you know about the rescue flight. Some of you have read the stories questioning Asher Vale's past. I invited you here because I believe truth belongs in the open." She turned to Asher and stepped back. "If you're willing." Asher faced the crowd. The room smelled of pine boards and coffee, familiar and grounding. He recounted the Afghanistan mission, not as a report, but as a human story. The desperate radio calls, the Black Mountain walls, the life lost, and lives saved. He spoke of leaving the service, of choosing to raise his daughter far from headlines, and of why he answered when the blizzard called. "I'm not a hero," he said quietly. "I'm a father who wants his little girl to know that when someone needs help, you help even if it costs you something. That's all I've ever tried to be." Silence filled the hall. Then a man in a mechanic's jacket stood. "You did more than help," he said gruffly. "You showed us what courage looks like when no one's watching." Clara Wren stepped forward, next voice bright with conviction. "Asher Vale saved lives in 2 storms, one overseas and one right here. That's not scandal, that's service." One by one, others stood: pilots, neighbors, the rescued medics offering thanks and respect. The applause that finally rose was long and unforced, warm enough to melt the winter air. Luna's eyes shone with pride. Marina caught Asher's glance, her own expression full of quiet triumph. That evening after the meeting, they walked together along the moonlit airstrip. Snow sparkled like crushed glass beneath their boots. Marina slipped her gloved hand into Asher's, a gesture both natural and deliberate. You face them with the same calm you face the storm, she said softly. That's leadership, Asher. That's the heart of the rescue division I want to build with you. He squeezed her hand gently. I thought today would be about defending the past, but it felt more like letting go of it. That's exactly what it was, Marina said. And you weren't alone. Luna, this community, they're with you. So am I. They paused near the Aurora X, its silver body glowing faintly under the stars. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant cry of a winter owl and the slow beat of their hearts. Yesterday, Marina said, I told the investors I was betting on character. Today, you showed everyone why that bet matters. You don't just save people in the air. You lift them here on the ground, too. Asher felt a quiet warmth spread through him, dissolving years of self-doubt. Maybe this is what my second life is supposed to be, he said. Maybe, she echoed, her eyes luminous. And maybe it's only the beginning for the project. And for us. The wind stirred lightly, carrying the faint scent of pine and engine oil. Asher looked at her, truly looked, and saw not the commanding CEO who once dared him with a careless line, but a woman who had weathered her own storms and chosen to believe in his. I can't promise I'll always be easy to walk beside, he said quietly, but I can promise I won't run from the hard truths anymore. Marina's fingers tightened around his. That's the only promise that matters. They stood together beneath the vast northern sky, two silhouettes against a field of stars. Somewhere beyond the mountains, the next storm might already be forming, but Asher felt no fear. For the first time since the war, his heart carried not just memories of survival, but the lightness of belonging to his daughter, to a mission reborn, and perhaps to a love that had already taken flight. A pale winter sun lifted slowly over the northern ridge, painting the airfield in soft gold. The Aurora X gleamed where it rested on the tarmac, a silent promise of skies yet to conquer. Inside the main hangar, a white board stood covered with maps, flight plans, and funding notes, a growing blueprint for Crest Aero's Northern Rescue Division. Asher Vale arrived early, Luna skipping beside him, their breath curling in the cold. He carried a thermos of coffee and an inward sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. The public meeting 2 nights ago had washed something clean inside him. For the first time, he could speak his past aloud without feeling trapped by it. Marina Crest was already there, jacket-off sleeves rolled, studying a set of weather data. She looked up as they entered, and the quiet smile that warmed her face made Asher's heart lift. "Good morning, Vale team," she said. Ready to build a rescue network, Luna beamed. Always, Asher returned the smile. "What's on the docket?" "We're charting permanent routes for rapid medical response," Marina explained, gesturing to a large regional map. "But we need an operations leader, someone who can train pilots, manage emergency logistics, and keep our crews safe." The investors agreed that person is you. For a moment, Asher simply breathed, absorbing the words. A month ago, he'd been a quiet snow removal worker, content to live in the background. Now the sky itself seemed to invite him back, but with a different purpose. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's a lot to take in." Marina's voice softened. "I know. And I don't expect an answer today. But I do want you to see what's possible." She led him and Luna into a side office where a large easel displayed sketches of a future operations center, hangars, classrooms, a family lounge for pilots' children. Marina's passion lit every word as she described the Vision volunteer programs, with local clinics, scholarships for young aviators, community weather alert systems. "This isn't just a division," she said. "It's a promise that no one in these mountains will ever be unreachable again." Asher felt a steady warmth spread through him. This was more than business. It was service, the very reason he had once flown into war zones. Yet a small knot of hesitation remained. "Luna," he said gently. Kneeling to her height, this could mean longer days for me. More flying. Are you okay with that? Luna looked from him to Marina, then back again. Daddy, you always tell me helping is what we're made for. If you can help people like before, only safer this time, I think we should. Her simple conviction pierced his doubt. He saw in her eyes the same fearless light he'd once seen in his medic friend, the one lost on that final mission. Maybe this was how memories turned into blessings, by guiding the next step instead of chaining it. Asher straightened and met Marina's gaze. Then yes, he said quietly. I'll lead it. On one condition, safety comes first. We never risk lives for schedules or headlines. Marina's answering smile was radiant. Deal. The following days blurred into purposeful motion. Asher worked side by side with veteran pilots and eager local recruits, transforming empty hangar space into a training hub. His marine discipline shaped every session: emergency maneuvers, mountain wind landings, zero visibility navigation. To everyone's surprise, including his own, he found joy in teaching. Each time a trainee mastered a difficult hover or a tricky night landing, Asher felt a spark of the same pride he once felt bringing soldiers home alive. Marina often joined the sessions watching from the observation deck, or sometimes climbing into the co-pilot seat herself. She asked thoughtful questions, learned radio protocols, even practiced basic instrument scans. I can't just be a figurehead, she told him one afternoon, her eyes dancing. If I'm asking pilots to risk storms, I need to know the storms too. Their partnership deepened in those hours. They shared quiet laughs over frozen thermoses and long discussions about building a culture of trust. More than once, Asher caught Marina looking at him with an expression that mingled admiration with something warmer, something that reached beyond the work. One evening, as dusk melted into a sky streaked with pink and violet, Asher and Luna walked Marina back toward the lodge. The crisp snow crunched underfoot, and the first stars appeared like shy sparks. Your daughter is remarkable, Marina said, glancing at Luna, who skipped ahead chasing a breath of aurora light. She carries a kind of courage most adults never learn. She's my better self, Asher replied with quiet pride. She keeps me honest, Marina smiled. She keeps me inspired. You both do. They walked a few steps in companionable silence before Marina stopped looking up at the sky, where faint green curtains of northern light were beginning to dance. When I was a child, she said softly, my father would fly us out on nights like this to watch the aurora. He called it the heartbeat of the sky. I haven't felt that wonder in years until now. Her gaze turned back to him, luminous in the strange, shimmering light. You've brought it back, Asher. Not just to me, to this whole place. Something unspoken passed between them, stronger than words, like the quiet moment before a rotor blade spins to life. A few days later, as if to test their readiness, the call came: a logging crew trapped by an avalanche in the northern pass. It wasn't as dramatic as the first storm rescue, but it was urgent and dangerous. This time, Asher wasn't alone. 2 newly trained pilots accompanied him in separate helicopters. Marina handled ground coordination, issuing calm, precise instructions over the radio. The operation unfolded like a symphony: 3 rescues in under 2 hours, every life saved. When the last survivor was safe, and the last chopper back in the hangar, the entire team erupted in cheers. Marina ran to meet Asher as he stepped from the cockpit, her face alight. Textbook perfect, she said, breathless. You've already turned a dream into reality. Asher smiled, the deep, steady kind that came from purpose fulfilled. It's the team, he said. Everyone played their part. Because you gave them the courage to, Marina replied. And for a heartbeat, they stood close enough that the noise of celebration faded to a soft hum. Later that night, after Luna had gone to bed, Marina invited Asher for a quiet walk around the silent airstrip. The sky above was ablaze with the northern lights, emerald and violet waves rippling like celestial banners. "This," she said, spreading her arms to the heavens, "is what I hoped Crest Arrow would become, a bridge between people and the miracle of the sky. And I couldn't have done it without you." Asher looked up at the shimmering light, and then at her, feeling a quiet certainty settle in his chest. "I think we were both waiting for a reason to believe again," he said. Marina stepped closer, the aurora reflecting in her eyes. "Maybe we found it here with each other." He reached for her hand, and she met his touch without hesitation. The cold air shimmered around them, alive with color and promise. For Asher Vale, the night sky no longer carried only memories of war and loss. Under the dancing aurora, the heartbeat of the sky, he felt the pulse of a new life, one built on purpose, love, and the quiet courage to begin again. The northern winter deepened, yet the airfield pulsed with a new rhythm, one of purpose and quiet triumph. Weeks had passed since the avalanche rescue, and Asher Vale's name had become synonymous with steadfast courage. The Crest Arrow Northern Rescue Division now operated on a 24-hour watch, its pilots trained under Asher's calm eye. But tonight, the airfield seemed to hold a secret of its own. Twilight faded into a velvet sky, scattered with early stars. The hangars, usually alive with engines and radio chatter, stood oddly still. A faint glow beckoned from the far end of the main runway, where the Aurora X rested, with its rotors silent and its silver body haloed in soft light. Asher had just finished a routine inspection when Luna came running, cheeks pink from the cold. "Daddy, Marina says you have to meet her at the far hangar. It's important." Her eyes sparkled with barely contained excitement. "Important?" Asher raised an eyebrow. "Does she need another weather check?" Luna giggled. "You'll see." Curiosity prickled. He zipped his parka and followed his daughter across the crisp, moonlit snow. The night air smelled of pine and distant sea ice. Above them, the first faint streaks of green shimmered auroras, stirring early. When they reached the far end of the runway, the sight took Asher's breath. The tarmac had been transformed into something out of a dream. Strings of tiny lights lined a path leading to the Aurora X, now glowing softly under a canopy of the northern lights. Lanterns cast warm pools of color across the snow. And standing at the end of the lighted trail was Marina Crest, wrapped in a deep red coat that seemed to catch and hold every flicker of aurora green. For a moment, Asher simply stood, the world narrowing to that single luminous figure. "You did all this?" he asked, when he finally approached, his voice low with wonder. Marina's smile held both playfulness and something infinitely tender. "I had help," she said, nodding toward a distant shadow, where Clara Wren waved before disappearing discreetly, and someone small who kept a very big secret. Luna giggled again, hugging herself with delight. "Surprise?" Asher chuckled, brushing a gentle hand over her hat. "You're both full of surprises." Marina stepped closer, her breath misting in the cold. "I wanted this place to look the way you make people feel lit from within, no matter how dark the sky." He felt something shift inside, a quiet awe mingled with the unmistakable beat of love. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "And there's more." Marina reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small box, not the standard glossy jewelry case, but a handcrafted cedar keepsake etched with the Crest Arrow emblem and the faint outline of a helicopter in flight. She opened it to reveal a simple silver ring that caught the northern light like a drop of starlight. Asher blinked, stunned. "Marina!" She took his hand, her eyes bright and steady. "Remember the first words I ever spoke to you. Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." At the time, it was a challenge thrown into the wind, half a tease. But you took that dare and turned it into a life-saving reality. You've built a mission, a family, a hope bigger than anything I dreamed. And somewhere along the way, I stopped joking. The wind hushed, as if the sky itself leaned closer. I don't need grand gestures or perfect timing, she continued. I only know that when storms come real, or the kind that live inside us, I want to face them with you. Will you marry me, Asher Vale? For a heartbeat, he couldn't speak. Memories of loss and promise tumbled through him. The war, the medic, he couldn't save the years spent shielding Luna from more heartache. All those shadows had once convinced him love was a door forever closed. Yet here, under the living lights of the northern sky, that door stood wide open. He drew a slow, steady breath and squeezed her hands. Marina, he said, his voice deep with feeling. You turned a challenge into a calling, and you helped me remember who I am. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes, Luna squealed and clapped, bouncing on the snowy ground. She said the first part, and you said yes. It's like a fairy tale. Asher laughed, his chest light. It is, isn't it? Marina slipped the ring onto his finger, an untraditional gesture, but perfect. Then she surprised him again by pulling a second, smaller box from her pocket. Inside lay a delicate silver bracelet, set with a tiny charm shaped like a star. This, she told Luna, kneeling to meet her eye, is for the bravest co-pilot in the sky. Because you helped guide both of us home. Luna's eyes shone as Marina fastened the bracelet on her small wrist. Thank you, she whispered, and then threw her arms around Marina's neck. Asher's throat tightened at the sight. For years he'd worried that opening his heart would somehow betray the memory of the woman he'd lost. Instead, he realized love could grow larger, expanding to include new people without erasing the old. Above them, the aurora flared brighter green ribbons, weaving with sudden streaks of purple. The heavens seemed to pulse in time with their hearts. Later, back inside the warmed hangar, they shared hot cider and laughter, while Clara joined them briefly to offer congratulations. Plans tumbled out easily, a small ceremony at the airfield. When spring softened the snow, a summer trip, to introduce Luna to Marina's coastal childhood home, and countless rescue missions that would now be part of their shared life. You know, Marina said with a teasing glint, investors will be very confused when they learn their pilot-in-chief is also the CEO's fiancé. Asher chuckled. They'll adapt. They've already seen stranger miracles this winter. When Luna finally dozed on a blanket near the fire, Asher and Marina walked outside once more. The night had deepened, and the northern lights arched across the sky in full glory, emerald curtains, violet rivers, and sudden sparks of gold. This, Marina said, leaning against him, is exactly how I dreamed it might feel. Not flashy, just right. Asher wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close against the quiet cold. Everything about this feels earned, he said, like the sky itself gave us its blessing. They stood in silence, listening to the faint hum of distant generators and the deeper music of the aurora overhead. For Asher, it was more than beauty. It was a sign that life could surprise you long after you thought all the miracles were spent. When they finally returned to the cabin, Luna stirred just long enough to murmur, "Best night ever," before slipping back to sleep. Marina brushed a soft kiss across the child's forehead, and Asher felt gratitude, well, so deep it startled him. He looked at Marina, her face serene in the firelight. I used to think the sky had taken more from me than it ever gave, he said quietly. But tonight, it feels like it gave everything back. Marina met his gaze with a gentle smile. Maybe the sky was waiting for you to come home. Outside, the northern lights continued their silent dance, as if sealing a covenant written in color and stars. In that shimmering glow, Asher knew with a certainty beyond words that he, Marina, and Luna were already a family, bound not just by promises spoken under the aurora, but by the courage and love that had brought them all through the storm to this moment of perfect calm. Spring arrived in the north with a quiet splendor. Weeks of sunlight and slow thaws had softened the white world into shades of silver and green. Icicles fell like soft chimes from the hangar roofs, and the air smelled of pine and new earth. Where winter storms had once howled, wildflowers now peeked through the warming soil. For Asher, Vale every dawn felt like another small miracle. He woke to the rustle of Luna, making breakfast plans with Marina, to the mellow hum of a world no longer haunted by the roar of combat rotors. The cabin that had once been a place of refuge now pulsed with laughter and fresh purpose. Today was more than a gentle spring day. It was their wedding day. The airfield bustled with quiet excitement. Pilots in their dark blue flight jackets hung strings of lights along the runway, while neighbors from the town arranged chairs and wove wildflowers into simple garlands. The Aurora X, polished until it shone like new, stood at the center of it all, waiting like a steadfast friend. Luna twirled in a pale blue dress. Clara Wren had sewn her silver bracelet Marina's gift on the night of the proposal, catching the sunlight. "Daddy," she cried as she spun to a stop. "Look, I'm almost floating." Asher bent down, straightening the crown of daisies in her hair. "You look like the heart of the sky," he said, voice thick with quiet pride. She grinned. "Today's the happiest day ever." "Are you nervous?" he chuckled. "Only the good kind of nervous, the kind that means something wonderful is about to happen." The ceremony was set for late afternoon, timed so the low sun might mingle with the first spark of the northern lights. Guests filled the chairs, pilots and townspeople, the medics they'd rescued in the blizzard, even a few investors who had flown in from far states. Clara moved among them with trays of cider and warm bread, her smile as bright as the day. When the first notes of a violin drifted over the field, everyone turned. Marina Crest emerged from the hangar, dressed in a gown of simple elegance, ivory silk, that caught the light with every step, and a shawl the color of morning sky. No corporate polish, now just a woman radiant with love. Asher's breath caught. In that instant, memories of their beginning rushed back, the crimson coat and teasing challenge in a blizzard, the tension of the rescue flight, the quiet talks in the hangar where old scars were finally spoken aloud. All of it had led here. Marina reached him, her eyes luminous. "I thought the sky might steal my breath today," she whispered. "But it's you. And you," he said, steady but moved, "are the miracle I didn't know I was waiting for." Luna stepped proudly between them as the officiant began. The vows they exchanged were simple and true. They spoke of courage and trust, of storms weathered and skies yet to come. When they sealed their promises with a kiss, the crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to rise straight into the endless northern blue. After the ceremony came the celebration. Tables were laid with hearty food from neighbors' kitchens. Music from a local folk band mingled with laughter. Children raced along the runway, their shouts of delight carrying on the mild breeze. Clara clinked her glass to call for quiet. This couple, she said, her eyes shining, didn't just survive a winter. They turned it into light for all of us. Here's to Asher and Marina, and to every life their new rescue division will save. The guests raised their cups, and the toast rolled across the field like a wave of warmth. Later, as twilight deepened, Asher and Marina slipped away for a moment of quiet. They stood by the Aurora X, now strung with soft lanterns, the scent of spruce and fresh rain in the air. "You know," Marina said, leaning into his side, "when I threw out that ridiculous dare fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you, I never dreamed I was speaking prophecy." He smiled, tracing a thumb along her jaw. Sometimes destiny hides in a joke. They watched as Luna and other children released paper lanterns, each carrying handwritten wishes into the dusk. The lanterns floated upward, their lights mingling with the first shy flickers of green and violet in the sky. As night gathered, a hush fell. The northern lights blossomed in full glory, curtains of emerald and amethyst unfurling across the heavens. Gasps of awe rose from the guests. The Aurora X gleamed under the shifting sky like a creature born of both earth and starlight. Marina turned to Asher, her eyes reflecting the spectacle. "This is how I always imagined Crest Arrow should feel," she said softly. "Not just engines and numbers, but something that lifts people's hearts." "And you've made it real," Asher said. "Not by yourself, but because you believed people could rise higher than their fears." She rested her forehead against his. "We believed it together." They stood, wrapped in silence, the aurora washing them in luminous greens and purples. Above them, the sky pulsed like a living heart. Below, the world felt safe and infinite at once. The celebration continued late, but eventually guests drifted home through moonlit paths, leaving only close friends and the quiet hum of generators. Asher carried a sleepy Luna back to their cabin, Marina walking at his side. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Asher laid his daughter in bed, brushing a kiss across her brow. Luna stirred only to mumble, "Best night ever again," before slipping back into dreams. Back in the main room, Marina stood by the window, watching the aurora ripple like a silent hymn. "I can't stop thinking about what you said earlier," she murmured. "That destiny hides in a joke. Maybe love itself hides in unexpected places until the right storm brings it out." Asher wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "If the storm was the price of finding this life, I'd face it all again." She turned to him, eyes bright with quiet tears. "And I'd dare you all over again." They shared a gentle laugh, then fell into a comfortable silence, listening to the night breathe around them. Weeks later, the new Northern Rescue Division launched its first official mission under clear skies. Asher guided a team of trained pilots through a flawless drill, while Marina coordinated operations with calm brilliance. Their partnership had become seamless, two strengths joined by trust and deep affection. The local newspaper captured a perfect photograph, Asher in his flight jacket with Luna on his shoulders, Marina standing close with a hand resting on his arm. The headline read, "Family at the Heart of the Sky." For Asher, it was more than a headline. It was a truth finally whole. He had once believed his life would forever be measured in missions survived and losses endured. Now it was measured in mornings, shared lives saved, and a love that had turned tragedy into purpose. That evening, as the sun dipped and the aurora flickered to life once more, Asher and Marina stood hand in hand outside the hangar. Luna chased a puppy someone had brought as a surprise gift, her laughter ringing like music through the cool air. "This," Marina whispered, "feels like the real miracle. Not just the flying, not even the rescues, but the everyday coffee at dawn." Luna's laughter, knowing that no matter what storms come, we face them together. Asher drew her close. "A sky reborn," he said softly. She smiled, leaning into him, and hearts reborn with it. Above them, the northern lights unfurled in dazzling waves, a living benediction over everything they had built, and everything still to come. In that glowing sky, green-violet eternal Asher Vale felt the quiet, unshakable truth settle in his soul. Love is the greatest rescue of all, and its light once found can turn every storm into a path toward hope. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? We'd love to know. Share your city or country in the comments, so this community of kind hearts can feel a little closer across the miles. If this story touched you or reminded you that love and courage can bloom at any age, consider subscribing to our channel. It's free, and it helps you stay connected to every new tale of hope and second chances we share. Thank you truly for spending this time with us. Your presence and your thoughts make these stories come alive. Until the next journey together, may your days be filled with peace, love, and skies as bright as tonight's northern lights.